when he goes into that trance kind of look and shaking and doing what he's doing, it's sexual, it's spiritual, it's you can see the show, but you know he doesn't want you. You feel like you're kind of peeking behind a corner and seeing something you're not supposed to see, but you can't. You look at it this going like, I feel you. I understand what you're trying to say. Am I doing all right?
Oh, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. So we're gonna start. Today is December 24th, 2020. It is Thursday, Christmas Eve. Yep. Who are we speaking with?
Louis Kee, Louiskee, but my friends call me Loose, Loose.
How did you get the nickname Loose?
Well, when I was dancing back in the day, about maybe I would say 1980. Some gentlemen used to go, used to call it, I was dancing at the Loft, and the guy yelled out like, Loose Louis, Loose Louis. And I heard it, and it kind of sounded kind of comical, and I was not thrilled about it. But I kept on hearing them, chant it, Loose Louis, get down, go ahead, do your thing. Because downstairs at the Prince and Mercer Loft, there was a lot of yelling and screaming and howling and cheering and clapping and everything else. So sounds and reactions was important. So when they gave me that name again, I kind of like, it stuck on for a while when people asking me, calling me that. And then I just cut it short and just called it Loose. And I thought, well, okay, I'm not easy. I'm just all over the place. So that means I'll dance over here, I'll dance over there, I dance with this one, I dance with that one, I dance with the good ones, I dance with the bad ones. And I'm not scared of talking to DJs or people like that. I mean, no one's important. Everybody's important.
I love that. I love that. So you brought up the Loft. What is the Loft?
What is the Loft? It's a venue that came out from a guy named David Mancuso, and it came out in like 75, I think 75 was. And basically, I didn't go to the original one, but I went to the second one. And that was at Prince and Mercer in Manhattan, New York City. And it was a venue where I had been dancing in Long Island since 1975. Really, getting, and this is during the disco era. And I had been a person who, when I left school, when I left high school, what happened was I noticed that I was kind of a depressed state because I realized I didn't go to college. I wasn't going to college. I didn't think I had the chops for it and everything else. And I was very disappointed that I couldn't. And my friends were going to college and they were going away. And the cool thing is you graduate and you're going to college. So I felt I had that little bit of depression. I didn't know what to do. And disco was going on. And I wanted to, I was an athlete, I was a musician, I was a drummer. And I wanted to fill that void up with something that I could keep myself active. And music did that, especially when it came down to disco music. So I would go to clubs and things like that. Eventually, there was a lot of my friends who were going to universities in Long Island, which I was from, they were having university parties. So I'd go to there. And it would be these DJs who would play at this, and the Rathskeller, which is a baby down, Rathskellers are usually like bars that change into places you can hear music and dance, or auditoriums, or not even auditoriums, I'm saying like cafeterias and things like that, that they would have these jams at Delaware University, Hofstra University, CW Post, New York Tech, Stony Brook, all these universities, would have these parties. And I would meet this new generation of young kids who were, I was a young kid too, but these were people that I would never meet. These were dancers. These were dancing majors, ballet, tap, jazz, modern. I was just like amazed with seeing them there and knowing that they did that. But the interesting part about it, I saw them on the sideline. I didn't see them on the dance floor. See, they because what they were used to doing is traditional dance, classical stuff. And I was doing abstract. I was doing something completely different. My body, my rhythm was different. Everything was there. So they looked at that as like, interesting. And I would dance with them. I'd look at them and I'd go like, okay, we're gonna dance. And they look at me like, well, you could see their dancing, their posture, like I'm a dancer, but they didn't know how to relax themselves. And my whole style was, and all that disco and all the other stuff and funk that I had learned and stuff like that, music I listened to was all about being open. So I was a person that came from a completely different area from them, but fascinated and was not embarrassed to come up to them and dance with them. And then I started to learn and see their styles and notice what they were doing, and I pushed them on. And I realized I'm not the greatest of dancers, but I can actually push them to that degree, which helped in the long run, because later on I started going to clubs in Long Island, which was like I was part of a group called Top Secret, and Top Secret was a group of university kids, 30 good friends, we call them, Top Secret. People like Eddie Murphy would go there. People like Public Enemy was there, who would, before they were who they were. So, Long Island had a tradition of having disco clubs and things like that. But it was a lot of these people who were part of Top Secret was going to the Loft. And that was there was a breaking time where you went to the garage to the Loft on a Saturday night. And then you had to wait until next Saturday. But we all had an itch. We wanted to go ahead and still dance. So we filled it in with Gotta Get Over the Hump Day Wednesday. And it was called the Wednesday Night Wiggle. And the Wednesday Night Wiggle was at a place called, what was it? I'm having a blank out the name right now, but it was this club that was just, I think it was native New Yorker. It was a native New Yorker in Long Island. And it was really an interesting experience because I started to realize that I had a power within myself to know that I could actually fit in and not be not be left out. A lot of times when you go by being a person with that goes to college, or a person who has a great job, or a person who's good looking, or a person who's, with athlete or whatever, or a musician, all those things, people feel that they're little muscles on them. And I realized that I found something that I could do, that it was fun and I can enjoy with other people. And that made it so much easier for me to find worth and value in myself.
Wow.
So people know me because they've seen me so much. And now at this time, I validate a lot of people's existence, meaning I validate their party life. And I didn't know that because I would see them and I would dance with them. So we had a certain communication with each other back then, no Memphis Garage, no Loft. And, it cultivated itself to a point where it took me to go ahead and go to Japan with Body and Soul. It took me to be on Maestro, the DVD Maestro, video, and be part of that whole situation and added stuff to it. I've been in constant videos and interviews with people, and I'm blessed that I'm able to do that. I wouldn't think I would be even looked at as a person that was of interest, but I think with all the knowledge that I have and all the things that I've seen, and how I talk to the young dancers and hang out with them and dance with them and understand them and perform with them, which I'm not a performer, I'm an enjoyist. I just like to enjoy dancing, but it happens to come along with the territory.
I love it. How did you discover the Loft?
I was going to we used to have the jams in the parks, and the jams in the parks were, you would have these, the town of like Hempstead or Freeport or Roosevelt or whatever, these towns in Long Island would have these things called the Tin Canteen. And these were portable stages that was they put in parks, but people had bands in them, if they're, battle of the bands, where you had bands battling, or you had DJs that were, playing in the park, and you had the music jamming, and it was just this energy of party, an outdoor house party. Now, what happens is I met this, each DJ, most DJs back in the day, and this was a little bit before disco and after disco, they used to have these um, DJs who had dancers who followed them. And and you'd have these group of dancers that would follow the DJ. So if you had Grandmaster Theodore and Grandmaster Flash, or no, or the Disco Twins, or one of these, these groups, that these DJs that were from either Brooklyn or Queens or Long Island or whatever, they would go to these parks. And they would, sometimes battle each other, with DJs. DJ would go on this one, DJ would go on that one. So what you have was these DJs who were double the bill, or, 2 or 3 DJs that are in there. You had a group of dancers that would hang out with them, to follow them, bringing helping equipment, plugging things up, just dancing and giving motivation and, energy to the, to the DJ. And we would kind of battle each other, kind of like soft that. But it was basically boys dancing girls, girls against boys, that kind of thing. What happens, one of the girls was named, used to watch me dance. When he was dancing with me, she said, "Do you go to Loft?" I said, "No." And she was part of a group called King Charles. And King Charles was a well-known DJ back then in the day. And she had asked me, Adrian asked me, she said, "You go to Loft?" I said, "No." She said, "You should come." So I had never been to I've been to a couple of clubs in the city, but I didn't really ever go to, I didn't know anything about this club at all. And when I went there, I came through there was 2 entrances. I didn't realize until later, but there was 2 entrances. I went to the side entrance. I went in this, I was looking at a storefront. When you go downstairs into the basement, if you go into the bodega and you see the little doors open and you go down to the basement to go ahead and get, produce down there into a bodega, it was like that. And I went down these steps. There was a spiral staircase that came down. I saw a woman at a ticket booth, like the actual movie theater ticket booth. She got my, membership card, whatever. I went downstairs and I saw these guys, they all were there were a lot of Latinos, there was Blacks, and there was a mixture of people who were either white or white people. And I was kind of confused because usually I'm, all Black crowd or white crowd, but this was really surprising because these people they wasn't dressed. Because in the disco era, during that time, in the disco era, everybody had to get dressed. Everybody at this party was in jeans and baggy pants and sweatshirt, and play clothes. And they were sitting on the floor. Some were sitting in chairs, some were sitting in theater seats. Some people just had, it seemed like the person that had the party was finding anything in the street and bringing it in to fill the place up. And the energy, but the lights wasn't dim. It was, they wasn't real bright, but they were just normal, regular, brightness of a light. Like you're out of somebody's house. And you could see the energy of these dancers who were spinning, splitting, and they were doing this to music. And I noticed they were doing one thing that was interesting. They were actually listening to the music. Because every time there was a certain peak of the music, everybody would hit that same mark, that same peak at the same time, which was not choreographed. It was just because they all were in tune with the music, which is a rare thing now because I always feel that some of the newer generation don't listen to the music as much as they should.
That's awesome. What is the Paradise Garage?
The Paradise Garage is I would say almost the sister of the Loft. You have Loft being one of the first, I would say underground New York City clubs that you had. I mean, you had gay clubs and stuff like this, but you had, and you had disco clubs, but this was the only, I call it grassroots, raw, unfiltered party. And they had, then you had people like Nicky Siano who decided to leave, that went to the Loft and went to the garage. And went to, and had his own party called the Gallery. And during that time at the gallery, there was, while he was playing there, you had, which is right around the corner from the Loft, you had a couple of years, you had two young guys that used to go to the gallery, and that was Larry Levan, and that was and Frankie Nichols. So they would, have that same, they would blow these balloons up, because the Loft had lots of balloons in it too. It was a thing, but that same kind of party, that same kind of balloons and festive stuff, which, I'll tell you about that later on, how that started from David Mancuso, was a part of how to give a party, the blueprint of how to give a party. And after watching this with Frankie Knuckles and Larry Levan at a Nicky Siano party, who learned from David Mancuso, the opportunity for a club to be open, like a gay club called The Saint, which was predominantly all white boys, blonde hair, blue eyed, that kind of club. They wanted to have another club like that, because Mike Brody wanted to have another club, but he heard about this DJ called Larry Levan. So he asked Larry Levan, he had to introduce themselves to each other to do that. There's a story about that, but I don't want to get into that one. But they they had this parking garage that they made into a club. And they, as the construction of this club, they had a couple of years where it was called the construction party, so construction years, where they were still building the club. So each couple of months or weeks, you would add a new thing to it, or they would finish this thing off. So it was a work in progress. And the garage was one of the biggest and most well-known clubs in the world. Every DJ from trance, techno, I didn't say drum and bass. I feel has learned that and understood the Paradise Garage. It's when the Paradise Garage is when the DJ became more famous than the actual club. And even more than the dancers. But, as you kind of spoke earlier, the dancers are very important, because if it wasn't for the dancers, they wouldn't be a DJ.
And what would you say are the differences between the Loft and the garage?
One is a house party and the other is a club. One is the Loft is a subtle, not in your face, not hard, beat, boom, boom, boom. It's subtle. It's subtle to the point where you really have to listen and you respond to listening to this music. And compared to the garage is more of an event. It's more of a experience. Both experiences, one's more grassroots and the other one's just more electronic and more, it's like David would suddenly give you songs that you could hear and make sure you can hear from any point of the room that you're in. The music sound that you heard was perfect. Larry would go ahead and have speakers that made you feel music from the bottom of your feet and come out your ears, instead of music coming from your ears and going down to your feet.
What made the Loft so special?
What made it so special, it was that you had people at the time in New York City in the 70s, late 70s and 80s, late 70s, early 80s, a time when the city was going through some really heavy shit. And I mean it to the point of the city was going bankrupt. We were asking the government for money so we could go ahead and get out of this bankruptcy that we had. And there was a lot of, the city was poor. And inner city kids in Harlem and Brooklyn and other places, and, all these kids were really, you get frustrated when you're broke, and I think the Loft was an outlet. And it was an outlet to the creative people that were that were, you know, DJs who were coming up, and that was I'm talking about the beginning of the Loft. It was a time when everybody wanted to understand how to find a different way of listening to music or hearing music, and the music changed into the dance. Mancuso had the first record pool. So some people don't know what record pool is. Every month you meet at the Loft at the building where the Loft was at. You would go ahead and get yourself some. You would be in this record pool where you could give like $25, and I forgot how much it was. I wasn't in it. I think it was like $25 or something like that, and you would get a whole stack of records. Now these records, some of them were good and some were bad, but your whole thing is there's gems in here. So you have to. It's kind of like finding flowers in a bunch of weeds. And when you go in there and do that, you feel more and you listen to it. So you can listen to every side, listen to the whole album, listen to all the cuts, and you pick out the gems that you had. And some of them were like off the chain, and some of which, you know, was shit. But that gave you know, the DJ culture a way of experimenting, having new stuff because there were so many artists making music that you had to go to the radio stations to get your music played so people would buy them. Well, this was a different venue. This is now that you're hearing music from the clubs. And that later on trickled down when it went to the garage in the years of the garage. The DJ was turning on the crowd, the new generation of people listening to music, a new sound. And the radio stations wasn't doing that. And they were shocked to know, why is people asking for these songs? The radio stations was like, why are people asking for these songs? And we don't even know what these songs are. They're not on they're not on a 100 list of music. Where do you get these from? We heard that at the Loft. We heard this at the garage. And they were very shocked. Especially like Frankie Crocker. He was completely shocked. A well-known New York City DJ with power, you know, of making people's records, you know, hits and things like that, didn't have the formula. This guy in a club called Larry Levan had music in a club that he was playing that no one else was playing. You know, a lot of the underground DJs played them, but the club controlled the music.
Explain that. Explain that for people.
Okay, the music industry with you know, BLS, KISS, all these other radio stations, they usually played the music. And you know, certain back in the day, I think it was called, was it Victrola? Can you help me with this? It was the Victrola. It was some kind of thing where if you were an artist, you give, you know, and you wanted your music to play, you give some money to them under the table and say,
payola,
and give them money to be able to, you know, play your record. Now, it depends on who has the money. You know, so if it's an artist from Motown, they got some money. If it's from Atlantic, they got some money. But if it's some other, you know, from some other label that's doing this, it's kind of hard to do that. So the thing is that, you know, you always hear the same, I'd say 25 songs on a radio station. No matter if the DJ, the disc jockey changed, they'd always kind of play the same kind of music. But what happened is that because of the power of the crowd enjoying the music and getting turned on by the music, and sometimes wouldn't even know what the songs were because they didn't know these artists. They didn't know what was going on. They'd hear these songs constantly. They'd go back to get this fix of music. Whether it was at the Loft when they heard music or at the garage when they heard music. But that music was a fix, and they got high off the music. And the high was so intense that you would, you know, it was like a religion. It was like an exercise. It was like a social experiment where people were there to be social that would never be social, you know, and because this music was so energizing and so, put your person to a trance where you just lose it, that the power of that trickled down to the record shops, where people would run to the record shop to find out what was that song he played at the garage, and people would go like, well, we don't know, or some of them would go to the garage so they could hear these songs, ask what they were, and then they would stock them into the record shops. So the power of that was taken was from the DJ to the record shop, was taken away from the radio stations, who was always playing the songs and you went to the record shop to get music.
Mm. Fantastic.
The little man who beat the big man up.
And then describe the type of dancing that happened at the Loft.
Okay. And I'll explain it. The Loft was in the dancing itself was acrobatic. There was handstands, there was splits, there was leaps, there was dives, there were back bends, there was walkovers, there were sliding across the room. It was I call it the unemployed dancer, which was meaning these were not professional dancers, but they wanted to be dancers, and their passion was in their dance. The dress code was usually baggy pants or the flat martial arts karate slippers or wrestling shoes. But the pants were usually baggy, and we call them gas pants. Some people in the Latin community call them huevo pants. But they were military drawstring chemical warfare pants, which usually would fit inside of the pant of most GIs back in the day. It was one of these things where when there was tear gas and everything else, you didn't want those chemicals to get into your system for some reason or into your skin. So this was kind of a layer to protect you a little bit. So the pants, the gas pants, the pants, which were gas pants or they were sold at certain stores, Army Navy surplus stores, which were put into shops like places called Unique Boutique, Antique Boutique, Ibis, Baggy Pants Express, Canal Jeans. All of these stores was where we got our gear. And you could tell a person that went to the Loft was dressing differently than the person who went to the garage. Because the person who went to the Loft would be more creative in their dress when it came down to the uniform. And the uniform, I said, was the baggy pants, it was the cut-off t-shirt, it was the shredded t-shirt, it was the beaded t-shirt. It was that martial arts mentality of being a warrior, but appreciating other people's styles. It was more of a school and a study compared to the garage, which more of an experience of being in a large room with lights and with sound that was just relevating through your body that lifts you up or make you scream and yell and everything else. Where the Loft did the same thing, but it had such an organic way of doing it. You danced with people when you were at the Loft. You danced, you danced with them. You danced, it was more yin and yang. If a girl was doing the same step as the guy was doing, if the girl was doing a step, a guy could do the same exact movement. The difference is she might use more feminine ways when she's doing a movement, where he might be more masculine. And at the same time, you'd realize that the way a man danced at the Loft was more trying to serenade the woman by dancing around her, showing his dance skills by going around her. And, and the floor was another extension of that. So you could actually go on the floor if you want to come back up. It's more of a corkscrew kind of thing. Where, and you had the room that in the Loft, where you didn't have the room in the garage to do that. You were mostly all cracked together, and you could do this you could hit somebody just by moving your arms a little bit. So you but you felt that you were in a large gathering of people who was feeling the same orgasm at the same time.
Incredible, incredible. What is lofting?
Lofting is a name for people, for the younger generation, who want to figure out what kind of dancing we did. And as early as they can go, they go to the loft. So they think it's called lofting. Lofting is something you really can't do, because it's like saying I garaged, I body and sold, I 718. You know, I look at it and go like, you mean the music, or you mean the people, or you mean what? And you see, but the younger generation, while they were learning this after the garage and the loft kind of like went to a certain area and other clubs were going on, a lot of the dancers wanted to figure out was stamping the names of things. You had breaking, you had popping, you had locking, you had, all these different dance forms. They had names for them. So you had styles to them. But what do you call this style that you see people do that is basically something that's from a club, and we don't know how to explain it, but it's got this feeling, and it's got this freedom, and it's got this hearing, and it has this love of friendship, of hugging somebody, and of, looking at them like, hey, my old friend, and you treat them even better than you treat your own family. That mentality, that as long as you're here enjoying music like I am, we're good. We're not basing you on your attire. We're not basing you on your economics. We're not basing you on your sexuality. We're not basing you on your height, your skin color. That's not the whole move. So now you have a arena where people are now so grateful to be accepted that they don't want to go any other place. Because when they go outside of the building, they have to deal with everybody else who's judging them on everything they do.
So you mentioned you went to the second iteration of the loft. Were there other locations for the loft after the one you went to?
Oh yeah, there was the I think it was the 687. I forgot the name, which the address was for that. 647, I think. And then that was the first one, I think. And then you had Princeton Mercer, and that was more in the 80s, to like probably 85. And then it moved to a place called 3rd Street between B and C. That was around the corner from two other clubs, a number of clubs. It was next to the New York Sports Cafe in the city, in the village. And it was around the corner from the World, which later on was Frankie Knuckles played at. It was his club. And then there was next door to New York Sports Cafe, which was a well-known poetry place that was synonymous for poetry, underground artists, and everything else. And around the corner from that was a place called Save the Robots. So in this 2-block radius, you had all these cool clubs. And then it moved from there, from 3rd Street between B and C, and it moved to Avenue A. And it was at Avenue A for a while. And then we had a situation where we lost Avenue A, and we couldn't figure out where to go. So you'd have these one-off parties, you'd have these, they would put these one-off parties they would have. He had one on 14th Street, he had another one on Avenue A, and that was almost next to, I would say 13th between Avenue A, near that area. And he had a couple of other ones that we have. He had one at Jelly Bean place, which is the Mark Ballroom. He had it over there. Union Square Ballroom. He had it there. So it was kind of like the family of the Loft are a very strong family, almost like a religion. and you can see, you can feel the love and the respect from other dancers, because you didn't have to be the greatest of dancers, you just were there. It's kind of like people say, are you a club dancer or are you a club head? If you're a club head, you go to the club and you can, you do your little two-step, or you don't do your little two-step, but you like the music. You're still part of the family, but you don't have to be the greatest of dancers.
I love that. We talked about how you discovered the Loft. How did you discover the Paradise Garage?
What happened was I was starting to go to a lot of different other clubs in the city during the disco era. And my family would have a family reunion every year. And we'd have a newsletter. And in this newsletter that we'd have every year, it would state, well, cousin Johnny, he just graduated college. Barbara and Dennis just got married. So just had a baby. And they would come to me and ask me, what did you do? And I go like, well, I was going to Studio 54, which I had done at that time. And I had went to other clubs, and I said I was going to the garage. Now this was pre going to the garage. It was by the time they get this, I'll probably go to the garage. But I never got a chance to go. But what happened was a cousin of mine, who I didn't realize he was gay, he was in the Navy. My cousin Daryl, loved him to death. He basically go ahead and said he gave me a call. And I had a very big family of cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that. And he gave me this call and said, hey, what's up, man? How are you? It's like, hey, hi, this is your cousin Daryl. Hey, what's up, Daryl? He said, I heard you go to the garage. You go to the garage. I said, yeah, I want to, but I haven't been there yet. He said, well, I'm a member. You want to go? I said, sure. So I was like, yeah. So I brought one of my close buddies with me, and we were online. We went to, as he said, meet us at the club. This is the address of the club, King Street. We got there to King Street, waiting online, seeing a whole bunch of people online. But I'm noticing there was only a few girls on the line. But I was like, okay, maybe the girls are inside. Maybe they'll come in later. But we're waiting there, and as we go into the club, and I go in there because he's a member, and you have to show your membership card, and you can get a certain amount of guests in with the membership card. I went inside, and it was mind blowing, because the first thing you do is you go up this, it's an actual garage, parking garage. So you go through this side door, like you step, you one of those doors garage doors that you open, but you have to step into it. There's two ways. You can open it up, or you can, and when you open it up, it's a door that has about a foot on the bottom, about 6 inches on the bottom, that's still wood. So you have to step into it to go into it. So you had this door that you went in, and you see all these cars on the side, like Mercedes or Rolls or a sports car or whatever, little antique cars, cool cars. And then you turn the corner and you go up this ramp. And then when you went up this ramp, it looked like, when you're on a runway in an airport and you see all the lights on the sides that guide the plane there. This is what you saw on the side. You saw these lights that were on the sides of the wall, on the floor. And while you're going into this parking garage, that's the only thing you see is these lights. But then you look on the top and you see the logo of the Paradise Garage, which is a man with a tambourine on his hand, holding a tambourine. And as you're doing that and you're walking at this, you hear this haunting sound of woof, woof, woof. You don't hear boom, boom, boom. You hear woof, woof, woof. Now the sound is the sound of hitting you like this. And it's echoing through the walls of this hollow a walkway, staircase, ramp that you're going up, that you have to go there to pay your money. But the music gets louder and louder every time you go up. So you wonder, what's rumbling? What's going on in this room that's going to rumble? So I go inside. I go inside, and I'm surprised by noticing everybody's cool. Just everybody's hanging out. This is a cool, big, huge place, and there was different rooms. You had coat check room on the left-hand side. You had the dressing room on the right-hand side, which is co-ed. You had straight in front of you was a crystal room. You had some of the bathrooms on the left-hand side that you had. And then you had the main dance floor that you had a little archive that you, not archive, a little room, short room entranceway before you go into the major room. And this major room, everyone was dancing in it. And then I realized, me and my friend are looking out, and we go close to the stage, and we look down at everybody that's partying out there because there's a stage there. And when we see the DJ up on the top, and we can barely see him, but he's like doing his little shit. And then we noticed, oh my God, there's nothing but men here. And we're in a gay club, and we're in shock. But we realized, wow, we've never seen an experience with people partying like that so much. We met women while we were there, which they were very surprised that we were straight men, and we had a great time dancing with them because it was like we were unicorns up there. They're like, "You're a unicorn? You're straight?" Like, yeah. Want to dance? Like, yeah. And we had the greatest of time dancing with these women. But the thing is that we learned that sexuality was not important, and that we were going to a place. We were going to their sanctuary. We were going into their home, and we were partying with their music, and which was a music that was universal. And we then noticing that it was something that changed my life, because it was another degree of music and clubbing that I had never experienced.
Wow, that's deep. You were part of dance crews back in the day. Tell us about which dance crews you were part of. You mentioned some of them before.
Not even dance crews. I think crews sounds like groups, but you go to parties. And, when I said dance crew, crews, it's basically what you have. It wasn't really crews. Crews was basically the word you would call breakdancers. You see, the same time when breaking dancing was going on, disco was going on, everything was going on. It was going on at the same time. Funk dancing, freestyle dancing was going at the same time. It all branched out different places. The breakdancers got their power more in the 80s. And I'm saying this in the way of when you said about crews, because we just had parties to go to. We didn't have crews. We never had to battle each other. We danced against, we didn't really dance against each other because you only dance against somebody that you don't like. You see, remember, back in the 70s, late 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of gangs. There was in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. It was Gang City, in 1975 and even earlier than that to the 80s. It was just like this constant fighting of young energy trying to get control because the whole world was fucked up and wasn't respecting them. And what happens is that you take this energy and you bring it to a place where they start killing each other a lot by having gang wars. And what eventually is African Bambaataa and a lot of other people decided that they were going to call it truth and say, look, we're killing everybody, we're killing each other, this is fucking crazy. Why don't we just stop? So they took the battle from physical battles to creative battles. And the creative battles was done in the dance, which was breakdancing. It went into tagging, which was graffiti. And it went into, DJing and MCing. So when you say the word crew, I couldn't say I was a part of it. And this is the thing. The B-boys, the breakdancers, they had crews. We were the older brothers and sisters of the breakdancers. So we were able to go into clubs and understand how to freestyle dance, and which was one of the things we mostly did. And they would see our freestyle dancing like we would see us, what we did at the Loft, and realize you guys are diving and you're splitting and you're kicking and you're doing all this stuff. And in breaking, it was all about dancing at you, where my generation was dancing with you. So when you say was there a crew that I was with, no, there was groups of people I hung out with, but we wasn't battling against anybody because we wasn't in that genre. This was not what we were doing. We were going to clubs so we could communicate with people and not intimidate them to show our power.
Talk to us about what is Studio 54?
Studio 54 is a great marketing platform club that was catered to the rich and famous, that was basically an ingenious plan to go ahead and make sure that people are privileged or feel privileged. And you had to be special. If you got in, then you were special. It was something that was a great experience to go to, but after going to the garage and the loft, you really don't want to go to 54.
Why?
Because one was more organic and real and catered to more of the everybody, compared to the other was only catered to the special.
Well said. Well said. Let's talk about the environment at the time. You talked about some of the clothing stores. Actually, before that, there was another movement that was happening roughly about the same time. And I think that's actually how I think I first noticed you was roller skating.
Ah, the roller skating group.
Yes.
Well, what it was is that I had tried roller skating back in the 70s and I did really awful. And the 80s, I tried again because you had all the roller skating rinks. I was like, I'm going to do this. No, it didn't work out at all. And what happened is I learned to inline skate. And I learned that in the 90s. So after the garage closed and everything else, I was dating a girl, and she basically would go to Central Park and roller skate. And I saw this energy, like there was well-known places like Empire Roller Skating Rink, Roxy. Then you had, what was the other one? Then you had Central Park and the Central Park skaters. And that energy of skaters was still club heads that were only on wheels. They were disco people only on wheels. This is kind of the early fun way. It was a fad thing that has lived past the time, the test of time. That doesn't get as much credit as it should get. It's now getting it as another as an old school art form, but it should always been. It's part of the club community anyway. As much as the hustle is, as much as roller skating, as much as going into a club and just freestyle dancing, the roller skating is the same.
We talked about Studio 54. We talked about clothing and clothing stores.
Yes, you mean unique, antique.
What is unique for those that don't know? Describe unique.
Unique was a hodgepodge or full of different kinds of ideas in a clothing store. It sold everything from your punk new wave gear to your army fatigue stuff, to your antique looking stuff, to your avant-garde, plasticky kind of futuristic kind of way. It was the clothing store. You get all the different kind of stuff. This was next to NYU. And the real deal is you had, I think it was Irving, Ira, and I forgot what the other one was. There was two brothers and a brother-in-law who owned clothing stores down there. The rent was cheap, and they got themselves a place, and they had a clothing store. And one of them had Unique Boutique, which is that clothing store, which was this. Whenever you're in the city, it was like colors, it was like cool clothes, it was like you name it. You went there and you got your gear, you got your clothes that you want to dress out. If you were going to Loft, you got your baggy pants from there. If you're going to a dressy place, you got your cool suit that you got that was cool with your thin tie. You got your outfits from there. That was the place that you did that. And again, that was just one of them. Unique was one spot. Antique was right next door to it, owned by the brother. His was more vintage clothing. So you got all your really, really good vintage clothing that you would normally get, stuff from the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, you could get there. And then down the street, a number of blocks down past Canal Street, going down towards, towards like World Trade Center at that time, whatever. In Soho, you had one by the brother-in-law, and his was called Canal Jeans. Now, all these clothes, you could put them in each of these stores and they would sell, except antique was more antique vintage stuff. And all the other stores had the antique vintage stuff, or had some of the army surplus stuff, or had, all these different kinds of stuff. So these stores gave you a style, gave you a, this was the go-to. You dressed as a dancer. You dressed and had leg warmers because you liked it. And I think the interesting thing is that we didn't have the internet. So our movies and our television dictated our style. If we saw Indiana Jones, people had the fedoras on their head. If we saw Flashdance, they had the leg warmers on their legs. If they saw Jane Fonda's workout, they had the sweatband around on the head. If they saw a martial arts movie, they had a ponytail that came all the way down the back of your neck. You've had, and all all the stuff that you saw, Blues Brothers, you'd had the hat. All these little things that you do, it was more about being an individual than it was being part of a team. So you had a uniform, but your whole idea was to jazz up the uniform. Compared with the garage was a theme party. So they would have black party, white party, a toga party, a beach party. So all these theme parties gave people some place they could dress and get creative.
Unique was on one side of 8th Street. I was on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Describe the 8th Street corridor, because at that time, 8th Street was live. 8th Street in New York City.
Well, 8th Street was really live in New York City. The thing is that was the Unique, where that was at next to NYU, was only 2 blocks away from, about a block away from 2 blocks away from 8th Street. Because when I met you and I knew you knew that 8th Street area, because all you memory lane about that, and we're talking about more of the 90s. 8th Street was hot because NYU was nearby, and you needed and if you went straight down 8th Street, it'll take you all the way down to the East Village. So you go to it would run into St. Mark's. So you had the punk looking stuff. You'd have the trash and vaudeville stores that had the punk stuff and new wave outfits and stuff like that. You got your glasses, you got your pants, you got your shit like that. And then you went further down, which was going down even to a rougher part of town, but you felt that you were able, from wherever you're at, to explore places that people would say was dangerous, but it was only dangerous to the non-knowing or the unconscious, the not woke person. When you're woke, you can go any place you want to because you know the animals in that jungle, and you know if they can eat you up, or you can pretend to be a bigger animal than they are, and they respect you for it.
So well said. So well said. What is shelter?
Shelter is the I said the reviving of the garage out of a club that wasn't just mega, but it was a mini-sized mega club. The shelter was, and this was at 6 Hubert Street, which is the first shelter that started in the 90s. This was a number of years after the garage. The garage closed in 87, and then you had Choice, and you had other clubs. The Loft was still going on a little bit after the garage, and then the Loft closed, and then it switched into at the Choice, which was where the new kids, the new dancers, we call them the grasshoppers or the new jacks, which was and I call them New Jacks, like New Jack Swing, that I'll be sure look, that look like New Edition. It wasn't New Edition, was it? With Bobby Brown and all those guys, their first edition, New Edition. Well, it had that look, that the fade, that they all looked like they came from Kid and Play video. I mean, they had that look. They stomped. They knew how to dress because they had to go to clubs. So they would dress with a white shirt on, a jacket, and a pair of pants that were flowing, and they wear these big old clunky hard shoes, and they would stomp. But they would have this energy, and most of these kids had African names because their parents was trying to get rid of having the names, roots that came out years before. So they were like, no, we want to go and call our son Naquan or Rashida. They want to give these African names to show some kind of pride and some kind of energy. So what happens is that as that was going on, these kids who used to watch people who went to the Loft in the Garage had figured out that, they had this lovely energy of power and strength and everything else, a new style of dancing that joined themselves, which they were really hip hop dancers, that joined themselves in a house community. And what they did was, as the evolution as that group of hip hop dancers that gathered themselves in the house community, because they felt a comfort of being around other dancers who wouldn't get in trouble. Meaning, when you're in hip hop, it's kind of hard to be able to go into a club, a hip hop club, and dance all crazy without knocking somebody's drink over, or people with attitudes, because it was all about being hard. When you went to the house clubs and these hip hop kids hip hop dancers went to the house clubs, they saw this welcoming arena of people who love to dance and embraced them to come into the club. Oh, you guys, hey, I like your moves. Yeah, I got moves too. You got moves too. It was a transferring of information. So this information that you see, what happened is it went to those guys were going to, they've been so good at dancing that they were even getting called out to be backup dancers for singing groups. Now this is going to go someplace. Some of them decided to go ahead and was so well of being backup dancers that the countries like Japan and other places was like saying, we love the way you guys dance. Can you teach us? And the dancers was like, oh, excuse me? It's like, yeah, we'll pay you. We'll send you to Japan and we'll teach you, and you teach us how to dance and we'll pay you. And they were like, okay. Now that generation was the younger generation. That's the new jacks. The older generation that was there, which is the Loft people and the Garage people, were just used to trying to live. So they were getting real jobs. They were going to civil service. They were being doctors, lawyers. They were doing whatever they had to do, because the party was now changing. But that evolution from the end of the Garage and the Loft and everything else, and choice was for that pinnacle point where those dancers, those new jacks with the old generation that was there, they were in clubs, but they wasn't in a club. So what happened was when they had the club vinyl, and Timmy Regisford, who played on BLS, had a club, you had this new generation of people who wanted to have this kind of, that wanted to have their own club. So the new people had their own new garage, and that garage was a shelter. And that's when they got very creative. That's when they were very family orientated. It was like one big family. We'd go and have dinner together. We would do all kinds of things together. We would share pictures. We would have fun together. That shelter was a salvation for the club life. It was a steady meal. It was a church you want to go to every Sunday. It was Saturday night. It was what you're looking for. And we didn't have that in that large arena in a long time.
Well said. I want to go back to the Garage. Was there a memorable performance that stood out to you or memorable experience?
Yeah. One night, me and my buddy Eustace Fagan, Huey. It used to be funny. They used to call us, my name is Louis and his was Huey, so it's Louis and Huey. The only thing they didn't say was, "Where's Dewey at?" But we were at the club and at the garage, and what happened was, I mean, remember Grace Jones would come in there and the performance was out the chain. It was always the big performance of Grace Jones. The line was around the corner. That was the pinnacle of the whole year, to see Grace Jones and how many times she went. But the most memorable thing is the garage was a gay club which had a Friday and Saturday night. And what happened was, they started to notice, the garage people, the owners of the garage start to realize, you know what, there's a lot of, we got straight people who want to come here too. So I know we are core and we feel happy to be all gay and all in our own world, but we might have to share the space a little bit. And to share the space, we might have to take the Friday night and make it more easy to have more mixed crowd of people, straight and gay. But Saturday can be completely gay. You can have a Friday night card and you can have a Saturday night card. Your Saturday night card, because you're gay and this is your world and this is your community, you can go on a Friday night if you want to. But a Friday night person could not go on a Saturday night. The secret to the club world is rules. And yes, rules. Membership cards, rules. Those are the two things that are not in clubs today. You got money, you can get in. You got influence, you know somebody, you can get in. Nah, you got to be recommended by a member. But the memorable thing is that we got into the club on that Friday night. They were doing one of their first Friday nights for straight people. Straight and gay. And they had, my friend was dancing, big dance floor, everybody's dancing. And I noticed my friend was dancing with this girl, and she was a cute blonde haired girl, had this kind of funky look to herself, completely not from New York, but she had this little edgy kind of cool, new wavy kind of punky, kind of punky looking look. And she was dancing, and what happened was, I asked my friend, yo, man, what happened to the cute girl you were dancing with? I said, I don't know. An hour later, the show starts. On the stage, the girl that we were talking about is on stage. She got two backup dancers, two black backup dancers, the girl and the guy. She starts singing a song called Holiday. Her name is Madonna. We're watching this girl do this thing, and when you're in a bunch of rooms with gay community, which they know pipes, they know singers, they hear strong, soulful singers. You can't come in light. You can't come in la da 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 da. You gotta come in there and sing like you're gonna raise the dead. And the gay community was like going like, no, we're not having this. Who is this little girl, white girl doing this shit? They booed her. First set, they booed her. And when they booed her, she still finished it. But the backup singers, I mean, it's like she picked up two dancers, and they didn't even know what they were doing. They were just following each other as backup dancers. And being dancers, so that means you have dancers looking at bad dancers, and you have singers looking at bad singers. So now you got it's just not, it's like a train wreck. What happened was Mike Brody saw this and thought, all right.
Who's Mike Brody, for those that don't know? Tell people who
Mike Brody was the owner of the garage. You had Mel Sharon and Mike Brody. Mike Brody was the brains, I think, and Mel Sharon, I would say, was the financial backup. But they're both boyfriends. They were a couple. They were in relationship together. They were partners. And Mike, had hired David, hired Larry to be the DJ or whatever. But that night when that happened, Mike looked at Larry and Larry looked at Mike like, you know, Mike was like, my God, they just booed this poor young girl who's coming in here to do this. This is not cool. And Larry looked at him like, dude, you know, they know good singers when they hear it. I can't help them. Mike was like, all right. He took the mic. He went, this is the part. This is not good. Don't you ever have an artist that comes up here onto the stage and boo them like that. If you don't, there won't be any more Friday night parties. We are better than that. She went back on. That was the power of that. That was the power of that.
Wow.
There is something. I got another story for you. Remember we talked about Frankie Crocker?
Yes.
And video and stuff like that? Here's what happened. There was a time in the garage where the radio stations wanted to figure out where this new sound was, and they wanted to broadcast from the garage. They wanted to be a live broadcast from the garage. Yeah, we're gonna put it on the air. We're gonna show the rest of the world we got the new music from the club. Larry didn't like that. Larry was like, "You bringing tourists into my house. I don't like this." Mike was like, "Hey, you gotta do this, dude. You're just gonna do it. You just bite the bullet. You gotta do it." Larry probably had that look on his face. Okay. Now what happened is that the FCC is a very important factor to being able to keep it clean, no cursing, nothing sexual, nothing like that. Clean, all American, yes. So what happened is that when BLS, done by Frankie Crocker, decided to do this live broadcast from there, I decided that I was living in Long Island. I was living in Long Island at the time. Before I went to the club, I know the club, it starts at 12 o'clock at night. I can get there at 4 o'clock in the morning, who cares? But before I do, I'm gonna go ahead and try to record this. So I put my cassette tape into my machine to record from the radio, the live broadcast from the garage. And as I'm doing this, I'm you know, you at the time back in the day, you get a cassette tape, and it was only maybe 30 minutes on one side and 30 minutes on the other side. So I stuck the cassette tape in. I was getting ready to go to the club and get dressed because I knew I have a tape. Who cares about it? All I heard was on the radio was, we're broadcasting live from the Paradise Garage with Larry Levan, you know, BLS. All of a sudden, the first song comes on is a call by a woman called Mary Ann Faithful. And this song has every raunchy 4-letter word that you can imagine in it. And it starts off, da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na-na. It's this rock kind of, you know, edgy, cool, funky song. And then all of a sudden, as she starts this Nina Hagen, this kind of Bjork kind of avant-garde woman singing, she starts talking about dildos and dicks and fucking her and sucking her and this and that and the other. And as soon as the words came out, the first word was the first line was good. And then the second line gets raunchy, and it gets even raunchier after that. And as soon as the second line came up, they clicked to the call letters BLS. And they cut it and they went to something else that they had pre-programmed and pre-taped. And I was like, wow, Larry had it like that, huh? He probably said,
wow. Do you have any memories from the Loft that stand out?
Yeah, my first time when I went there. I had when I went to Loft and I came down the spiral staircase, and my friend Adrian, got me in there and everything else. And I noticed all these Latinos that were like wearing baggy pants and shredded t-shirts, and and black and white people there dancing, just like, and it was just people dancing, little spots of people dancing, you know. I saw this guy at the end of the room with his legs, no, who was running, and he was running from one end of the room to the other end of the room. And as he's running to the other end of the room, there was a guy standing there that was like, looked like he was running at this guy. So you saw this one guy, and he started running, and this other guy standing there with his legs spread open. And the other guy's running really, really fast. And all of a sudden you see him, that one guy who's running, you see him go straight for this guy, straight in foot, and then he goes into a split, front split, put his head down and slides right through his legs and come back out. And I went like you did, wow. And I went, oh, this is a completely different level that I've been dancing. This is just, I thought I was in school. This was college. This was college. I was like, everything I thought I knew about being free on it was nothing. This was the freedom of it all. And I said, I got to come back. And I did. I became a member and everything else. And I realized I was going to the, when I got there, I remember when I got there, some people look at me going like, especially a guy named, a dancer named Chris, Karate Chris Buxenbaum, who passed away. He saw me and he was like, oh, you're from the garage. You better go back. You better go back home. Don't hang out here. You're from the garage. I'm like, why are you louding me out? Why are you hating? And he's like, you're from the garage. Go back. And I realized I was by myself there at the Loft, but I said, I'm not gonna let you intimidate me. I'm gonna still come back. And I kept on coming back, and we became very good friends after that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have any memories from Studio 54?
Yeah. Well, I have memories when I didn't worry about the important people because I didn't know who they were anyway. And I was about the dancing and party. I wasn't worried about who was famous and wasn't. And they had these two things. You had this, when you're dancing on the dance floor, you had these long cylinders that had lights that came down like a column. It came right down, and it came down about probably from the rafters all the way down, because it used to be a theater. So you have these big cylinders that would come out. They come down, and when they came down, they would come out only to about maybe a foot off the floor. So it stopped a foot off the floor, but you see these columns. And if you ever see pictures of Studio 54 and you see these lights that came down, they would go down and they would be risen up. So as you're dancing, you see this cylinder coming down. Enough time for you to move out the way, but it would come down. Now, that was, and then you had another part. You see, since it was a theater, and you did, you had lighting and you had the speakers and things like that. You had this trestle, this trap that went across the room to adjust the lights or to adjust the sound, especially the lights. And this was for workers when they had to go ahead and fix the lights. Well, what they did was they made it like a ride. People would get on it and it would go from one end of the room of the stage to the other end of the stage. So you could be looking down and looking at everybody from the room. That was cool. That was cool. I was like, no, that's cool, because it wasn't like you had to be down there to be in it, but you could be over them and you could have this bird's eye view of everybody dancing on the bottom. And then after they get to the end and they come back, somebody would get off and somebody else get back on. A couple of people would get on. So it was like enough people, like, how about maybe, probably maybe 10 people. And they counted like 10 people could only go in there, and they would go back and they would go slowly across the dance floor. That was important. That was cool.
What is Body and Soul?
Body and Soul. Body and Soul is John Davis's baby, which is somebody I didn't know before then. But this was a group of DJs, a club that was done at, its birth was at Hubert Street, the same place the Shelter was. Later on, it was able to be for, was it Denny Teneglio Party? I think it was called Be Yourself.
Yep.
And then there was NASA, which was like techno. Then you had Dance Ritual. You had the Shelter. You had Body and Soul. So at that venue, which used to be called Area, which was a well-known club back in the day called Area, that same venue was able to be the home of those places. And Body and Soul was Joe Clistel, Danny Krivit, and Francois K. People who know the garage, understand the loft. And Joe Clistel, which was the new kid on the block, who understand how to be spiritual. Each DJ had their own way of communicating about their music. The team was able to be so, it was when people, it was more the new European crowd. A lot of people, plus the natives, and then you had a lot of European crowds, which means it can be a gay party sometimes, but with sections. But you had your people there, and the music was always playing on. It was the mixture. It wasn't just an all-Black crowd or Latino crowd. It was a global crowd. When I went to Denmark in 98, 97, I was coming on a plane and I was trying to make it. I was on a plane from Denmark to New York, and I was hoping to try to get back to make it on Sunday to go to Body and Soul. And as I'm on the plane, and you have these, you're looking at the movie on the screen, the movie screen that you have on the seat. I start noticing that they start talking about advertising in New York City. And then the advertising in New York City is Central Park, skaters, and this and the other. They showed Body and Soul. And I was like, that's the place I go to, and I'm not there now. I was just like, yes. But it was the advertisement. It was what they were trying to sell New York for. When you go to New York, these are the places, these are the things to do, and they show Body and Soul. And I was like, yeah.
Wow. You also toured with Body and Soul.
Yes.
How were you selected to become a Body and Soul dancer?
I was surprised myself. Basically, I was asked by Francois one day. I was at some party, and Francois asked me. He said, "Louis, would you like to, go to Japan with us?" And my mind was thinking, "Who am I, and why are you asking me this question? Like, I'm only the dancer that just goes to the club and loves dancing and loves joining people and appreciates music, man. And you're asking me why I want to go to Japan." I'm thinking, I never thought about the option. I never thought that I would be ever asked to do things like that. And I think I was called there to be a dancer because I could mesh and dance with anyone. And I could get people to dance. And I was a DJ's muse. So with all those three factors, that's why I was involved. They took me to Japan 3 times. They took me to 4 times, and they took me to Hong Kong, and which you were at, in Japan, really. And how do I put it to you? It's always great to be able to dance with them. It's always great to do it. When I dance with them, I kind of not dancing for them. I'm dancing for the crowd. I'm trying to get the crowd to respond to the dancing and understand. I think they wanted me there, so it wasn't like I was a show. It was more like it was class participation. I would take Sheba, Rico, Angela, Jay Wise, you know, we would take the dancers. At one point in time, as we're dancing for hours up on the stage, we would just break off and be like, we're gonna go up into the balcony. We're gonna go into the audience and we're gonna dance with them. And they were like, wonder, why is the show coming down to us? And it was basically to say, we want you to dance with us. We're not the show. The DJs are not the show. You're the show. You have to dance and show us that this is why you, this is what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to praise the DJ like he's gonna levitate. It's not a theater piece. No. You're supposed to react. So we're showing you how to react.
I love that. Do you have a memorable, two-part question, a memorable experience of Body and Soul in New York, and then a memorable experience touring with Body and Soul?
Well, in Body and Soul, I always had a great time. I didn't have one time that was better than the other. It was just, you know, the whole experience of being there, you know, hearing the boys play, Joe losing it, you know,
Describe how Joe Clozel plays.
Like he's in a trance. He plays like most people dance, but what he does is that you can feel that he's feeling the beat. And his style has resonated from a lot of DJs that understand how to play it. See, he plays music like a person drives a stick. See, everybody's on automatic, like, yeah, you know, everybody's, you know, driving the car, just put it in the park or put it in drive. No, he's like, I am going to put you in front, first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear. And what happens is you feel that from him because he is being part of his body and his aura is being part of the music experience that you have. When he goes into that trance kind of look and shaking and doing what he's doing, it's sexual, it's spiritual, it's you can see the show, but you know he doesn't want you feel like you're kind of peeking behind a corner and seeing something you're not supposed to see. But you can't, you look at it this going like, I feel you, I understand what you're trying to say. Am I doing all right?
Oh, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. What is 718 Sessions?
718 Sessions is the sister of, one of the sisters of Body and Soul. You know, the brother of Body and Soul. It's Danny Krivit's taking it to that other level. It's Danny Krivit's showing what Danny's house is like. This is minus Francois and Joe. This is Danny going into classics and hearing disco music that he heard, you know, hearing garage classics that he heard and playing it in a way where he wants us to listen to it.
Well said. Well said. Describe the current state of, besides COVID, you know, before COVID, describe the current state of the scene in New York versus what it was during the Loft and the garage era and how it's changed.
Wait, repeat that again so I can get this.
Oh, sorry. So describe, you know, excluding the whole COVID situation right now, describe the scene, you know, the scene in New York City, you know, say early in the year or late last year versus the club scene versus what it was during the Loft and garage era. Okay.
It changed. The energy has changed compared to the Loft and garage era. The garage and Loft era, which there was more people being in the Loft and the garage era compared to now. There was more people in the Loft era, in the garage era, who appreciated being unique. This era, it's really, and it's been changing for a while from that time to now, where you had to be famous before you become talented. Well, back then, you had to be talented to become famous. The reason to dance is, like, example, we've taken a very spiritual kind of music, culture, attitude, dance styles, and made it into, from being very spiritual and everything else like that, and communal, to a very commercial kind of way, which means when you go to clubs in Europe or any other place, everybody's watching these DJs are playing house music, and we don't know who these guys are, but they're packing stadiums. They are, and people are just, doing this and trying to be next to the DJ and get a selfie and trying to validate themselves on Facebook or Instagram to get likes to say that I'm somebody. Compared to dealing with somebody who just want to be accepted for who they are, instead of having to conform to a group of people who really don't really care about you in the beginning because they don't know you, because they're all into it they're all individual players now. And they might say, but we're feeling it. It's like, no, and I don't want to feel like an old person saying, we used to do it like the good old days. Okay, I'll put it this way, but to me, it's like this. A lot of the dancers have learned styles from a lot of dancers, and it's gotten to be a projection, marketable, and we can understand that. The dancers, the teachers that we know, that I know, have been doing this for years, and they've run house outside of the genre of in the club, and now they do it and bring it to the studios. But the studio now is the new safe haven for dancers who like house music. It used to be that we could go in an outdoor event and lose our minds and bring our kids there and enjoy the whole atmosphere and the party of this. And it gives you, as a person, something to look forward to. I think this generation doesn't have that, and I don't expect them to have it, but it does happen. It's the basics of what house music is. It's a house, it's a home, it's a family, it's communal. So when you take those areas out and you mix it, because hip hop is more, showy and poppy and stuff like that, and then you have rap, which is so hard and so, materialistic and homophobic. You're kind of, it's kind of like having a chicken soup, making chicken soup, and they added everything else except the chicken. See, the chicken is the soul of it. It's the losing your mind. It's who fucking cares what I'm doing? I'm enjoying myself. As long as I'm doing it peacefully and everybody's doing the same thing, we can get off at the same time. But we can't get off when everybody's wondering, how do I look? I bring my people with me. I'll stand around and we'll all get together. We'll take shots. We'll take shots so we can get drunk so we can feel something. We don't need to get shots to feel anything. We need music to feel something. There's a bar and there's a club. And sometimes people get that mixed up. And sometimes because of the venues, they have no other choice but to combine them together. And the newer generation don't see that love, don't know what that is, unless they go to outdoor events to see that. Do you know that at the Loft at Prince and Mercer, we had children there? Parents that had kids wanted to go party. The parents. So you can't go and drop the kid off at night, let him sleep, and then go out to the party, 12 o'clock at midnight. No. But what you could do, if the party goes from 12 midnight to 2 or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, You can bring them at 8 o'clock in the morning. Road trip, we're going to the club. And you're gonna see all your uncles and aunts. And they have balloons and they're on the floor and they're rolling the floor and you rolling the floor and you have your big wheel and you ride it this way, you're in a hobby horse, you're doing your thing. And we are part of the passing the torch to the young kids to say it's all right to have fun. When you see a child as they're growing up, they start to realize they're learning how to maneuver in themselves, walking, talking, what they can get away with, what they can't, how they can temper tantrums to get what they want, what they don't want. That's normal. But what happens is that they have, by learning this, they learn rules by their parents. And when their parents give them rules, there's always a restriction. You can't do this, you can't touch that, you can't do this, you can't look at this, you can't eat this. So what happens is when a child sees their parent dancing, mom and dad smiling at each other, flirting with each other, dancing with each other, appreciating life and appreciating music, and the child is able to dance around, and the parents dancing around, that's a moment of experience. When children are with their parents and they realize that, you know, some people say, oh, I remember being with my mother and she used to cook and I'd be there in the kitchen helping her out. Or I was with my father while I was cutting the grass or changing a car tire. Or my father when he took me on the boat when we did so and so, or we went over to a family reunion. All these little experiences is what makes a person grow. And by having that growth that you have from a child, you had that at the Loft. And these kids were able to be around people in a social environment that was regulated and watched by other adults who understand the value of a child. That's why when you see things like Fort Greene Park and you see things like Coney Island and you see things like the amphitheater, you see adults with children because it's that's the evolution of it. This is what you're supposed to do. And back to your question again about, you know, the club scene, the people who are supposed to be able to represent house music are the people who are supposed to live in the city first. But now you have more tourists coming in doing it. And you have more people, you know, more people that just moved in, transients, who are there to change the script. It's like gentrification. Whenever you bring somebody into a new place, they just change the furniture. They don't tell you that they didn't like it. They just change it because we're not used to that. And you see the same thing with music. You know, house is an experience that should be, is a very spiritual thing. And now it's a sport. The Olympics is going to be a sport. Battling with dancers is a sport. You're an athlete, but you're a musician. And if you're a musician, you're supposed to listen to the music and follow the music. You don't follow the action. So the action that I see now is more of a competition, which is based from breakdancing that got very popular. And the spiritual part of it is now downplayed a little bit. The resurgence of that, of getting back to basics and stuff like that, comes from the African community by bringing African music involved with that. Simple, going back to basics. You got to go home, motherland, go back to home, realize where the drums hit you, realize that environment. When I see house music done by the African, my African brothers and sisters who are putting out this lovely energy with smiles on their face. There's no, I'm competing with you. They're like, I'm enjoying. That's a moment that you have to look at. And we had that in New York. But New York changed. And New York didn't cultivate the music. And club scenes changed because it was too expensive to have, they were easy to have bottle service and make twice as much money without having, and pack them all in there and make this money to pay the big rents that they have to pay for. So the spiritual, warm, loving family orientated kind of person don't get that in the club. And the new kid that comes along from Europe or whatever don't see that in the club. So, and even when they come from Europe, they don't get that in the club, in the club that they go to. But as soon as they go to an outdoor event, a soulful house party, they're realizing, oh, this is what it is. Oh, you dance with each other. You mean you're dancing with me? Yeah. And I'm challenging, not challenging you, but I'm channeling you. I'm showing you I like what you do. And she's saying, I like what you do. And you have this yin and yang connection, which is so important in life to be able to learn to mesh together and love each other than to reject each other because we're different.
That's the perfect way to end this interview. That was perfect. Thank you so much. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you want to speak on?
Well, I have to give you credit.
No, this is fantastic. I actually want to do a part 2 at some point too, because I feel like we scratched the surface. You have so much knowledge to share, and I don't want to drain you. So it's like
No. I think the surprising part about it is that when I do interviews with people, they're a little bit more fascinated because they're like, "What you just?" I was like, "Yeah, I watched a lot of shit. I knew a lot of people. I validate a lot of people. I mean, validate meaning, yeah." I might not know everybody and I might not be in every situation, but I understand how it works. And hopefully with all this information and all this stuff, that somebody will take this and keep it in its purest form and recreate it in the true form.
And that's my intent.